For 30 years, one man has been screaming into a void.
That the number one problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia.
They called him unstable. They called him a has-been. They called him a liar. But here's what they never called him: wrong.
I was surrounded by them. They were everywhere like vultures.
And while Feldman was being laughed off talk show stages while the machine was burying his name, the most powerful gatekeepers in American media were standing at every red carpet, every industry event, every private gathering arms linked with the exact people he was warning us about.
It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take
8 arms, 1 head. Today we're talking about the arm nobody wants to name, the media arm, the cultural arm. The arm that didn't just stay silent, it decided what you were allowed to hear. And 2 names sit right at the center of it. Let's establish something before we go anywhere else, because this matters. Corey Feldman was not a conspiracy theorist. He was not chasing clout. He was not mentally unstable. He was a child who was handed to predators by an industry that treated access to children like a currency. And when he grew up and tried to tell the world what happened, that same industry spent 3 decades making sure nobody listened.
Thousands of people in Hollywood who have this same information. Why me? Why is it if I don't release the names in the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm the bad guy? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
Thousands of people, not dozens, thousands. People who were in the same rooms, heard the same conversations, witnessed the same things, and every single one of them chose silence. That is not coincidence. That is not awkwardness. That is an organized, maintained, purchased system of silence built by people with enough power to end careers, destroy reputations, and according to multiple documented sources, end lives. Feldman spent $1.3 million of his own money he could not afford to lose to make a documentary called My Truth, The Rape of 2 Coreys. He named names: Marty Weiss, John Graham, Alfie Hoffman, Dominic Brazia, Charlie Sheen. Those names were explosive, but Feldman himself said something that got far less attention than the names did. He said those names were just one arm.
It was a circle of older men, and they all had either their own power or connections to great power that surrounded themselves around this group of kids.
Connections to great power, not just predators with industry access. People connected upward, people whose protection came from somewhere above the Hollywood food chain. And the man who has been most precise about describing what sits at the top of that chain is Jim Caviezel, the actor who walked away from a mainstream Hollywood career rather than stay quiet about what he knew.
It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take
8 arms: the Hollywood arm that preyed on child actors, the political arm, the financial arm, the island arm, and the one that Caviezel keeps circling back to without always naming directly, the media arm. The arm that controls what stories get told, what names get printed, what scandals get buried before they reach your screen. And if you want to understand who sits at the center of that arm, you have to start asking a question that most people in this industry have been terrified to ask out loud. Who decides what America is allowed to know? Here is a fact that is not speculation. It is documented, cross-referenced, and confirmed across multiple independent investigations. Oprah Winfrey's name appears in the Epstein documents, not once, 5 separate times. Now appearing in documents does not equal guilt. That is a legal reality, and we are stating it clearly. But here's what Jim Caviezel is not talking about when he makes a legal argument. He is talking about a pattern. And patterns, when they repeat consistently across years and across completely separate cases, stop being coincidence and start being architecture. Oprah Winfrey has more cultural influence than almost any single individual in the history of American media. She decided which books became bestsellers. She decided which doctors became household names. She decided which politicians received the cultural stamp of approval that money alone cannot buy. And most critically, she decided which stories the American public was ready to hear. That last one is the power that matters most in this context. Harvey Weinstein stood beside Oprah at industry events for decades. She introduced him to young actresses. She gave him something no amount of money could purchase: her personal endorsement, her proximity. Her credibility transferred directly onto him. When Weinstein eventually fell, Oprah's proximity to him was noted and then quietly dropped from the conversation. The media cycle moved on. Her brand survived intact. Then there was John of God, a Brazilian faith healer she promoted to millions of viewers on her platform. She gave him a global audience. She validated him to her most loyal followers. John of God was later convicted of serially assaulting dozens of women. His background, according to researchers who looked at his history after his conviction, had red flags that a basic investigation would have surfaced. Yet Oprah gave him her platform, her audience, and her implied endorsement. Weinstein, John of God, the Epstein documents, the Diddy parties, which we will get to. Every single time the same pattern surfaces: proximity, validation, silence, and then when the heat gets close, a pivot to philanthropy, a carefully timed charitable initiative to redirect the public conversation away from the questions nobody is supposed to be asking. That is not a coincidence. That is a playbook. Now let's talk about Ellen DeGeneres, because her connection to this broader network is something that very few channels are discussing seriously. And the reason it doesn't get discussed seriously is the same reason Corey Feldman didn't get taken seriously for 30 years. The people who might connect those dots publicly have too much to lose. Anne Hesh was Ellen's partner throughout the late 1990s. Theirs was one of the most publicly visible relationships in Hollywood magazine covers, red carpets, the kind of high-profile coupling that becomes cultural shorthand for an era. But according to sources who worked alongside Anne, what was happening behind that public image was a very different story. Anne Heche was developing a documentary called Children of the Machine focused on child. People close to that project have described Anne as someone who had witnessed things during her years in Hollywood's inner circles that she spent a long time trying to understand and articulate. Things that, when she began putting them into words for the documentary, apparently made her a person that very powerful people needed to monitor closely.
Bed, wear white, just wear everything is white. Drink the water, take the earth.
Strange instructions, strange rituals, described in Anne's own words. In August 2022, Anne Heche died following a high-speed single-car crash into a residential structure in Los Angeles. The official conclusion was accident, but people close to Anne and sources connected to the documentary team she had been working with have been vocal about what they believe the circumstances actually represented. We are not stating this as confirmed fact. We are reporting what the people closest to Anne have said publicly. But when you place that crash alongside everything else we are discussing, when you understand that Jeffrey Epstein himself died in a federal facility with malfunctioning cameras and a conveniently reassigned cellmate, the question of whether inconvenient witnesses face consequences stops being a paranoid theory and starts being a pattern with documented historical precedent. Children of the Machine is reportedly still being completed. The team working on it has stated they intend to release it regardless of the pressure they face. When it drops, it is expected to make connections that have not yet been made public. Now we need to talk about what was actually happening on Little St. James. Because the public understanding of Epstein's Island is still, years after his death, years after the document releases, dramatically incomplete. Most people understand it as a operation, a blackmail hub, a place where powerful men did things they needed to keep secret. All of that is documented and confirmed. But what the deeper document review reveals, what investigators and analysts who have gone through hundreds of thousands of the DOJ email releases keep returning to, goes significantly beyond and blackmail. Among those emails, analysts identified a system of food-based code language, specific terms used in specific contexts that make no rational sense if you interpret them literally. Beef jerky, white tuna, pizza, grape soda.
There were emails from people, redacted names again, saying, hey, I have 68 pounds of jerky in my freezer. I'm not sure what to do with it. There were emails of, I need more jerky. I'm going to send it to the lab.
68 pounds sent to a lab. The quantities being discussed, the logistics of storage and refrigeration and transport, the lab references, none of it maps onto any conventional interpretation of snack food. And then there is the chef, Francis Darby, a man whose name appears in emails with Epstein discussing recipes, quantities, preparation methods, and storage instructions for items being prepared on the island. The chef responsible for this food preparation owned and operated a restaurant in New York and Los Angeles. That restaurant was called, without any apparent irony, The Cannibal.
6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island.
The day after his federal indictment in 2018, Jeffrey Epstein ordered 330 gallons of industrial sulfuric acid to be delivered to Little St. James Island, 6 55-gallon drums. Investigators who reviewed that order have been consistent in their assessment. You do not order 330 gallons of industrial acid to maintain a desalination system, and the island itself was engineered from the ground up to make departure impossible without authorization. Passports confiscated, flight crews paid, airport staff at St. Thomas bribed to look in the other direction. This was not a vacation destination, this was a controlled environment. And the people who traveled to that controlled environment traveled there because what happened inside it could not happen anywhere else. Now here's the connection that ties the media arm directly to the island operation. when you look at who was providing cultural cover for the people flying to that island, when you look at who was validating, platforming, and socially protecting the figures whose names appear in those flight logs and guest lists, the same institutional names keep surfacing. The same media gatekeepers who decided Harvey Weinstein deserved decades of protection. The same cultural validators who gave global platforms to men who were later convicted of serious crimes. The same figures whose names appear in the Epstein documents and whose response to that appearance has been consistent, sustained, institutional silence.
She believed consumption was transformation, that youth could be taken in, that vitality could be absorbed. She talked about ancient rites, about elites throughout history who understood what the masses didn't.
Ancient rites, elites throughout history. The mainstream medical community, not fringe researchers, mainstream institutions has been openly funding and studying compounds derived from young blood, plasma transfusion trials, stem cell anti-aging protocols, clinical studies on whether biological material from younger donors can reverse aging markers in older recipients. That science is real. It is funded. It is being studied right now. What witnesses from Epstein's network describe is the version of that science that operates without ethics boards, without consent protocols, without any institutional oversight. The version that requires an island with no cameras. The version that requires a guest list that never gets published. Here is the mechanism that holds all of this together. The thing that Corey Feldman identified 30 years ago and has been describing in increasingly precise terms ever since. You don't just attend, you participate. And once you have participated, your silence is not maintained by loyalty. It is maintained by mutual implication. Everyone in the room carries the same weight. Everyone in the room has the same reason to protect the secret. That is not a social dynamic. That is an engineered trap. And it has been described by multiple independent sources as the single most effective protection mechanism the elite class has ever constructed. When Jim Caviezel made Sound of Freedom a film about child rescue operations, not about any specific celebrity, not making any specific accusation, the response from the industry was immediate and total.
I was told from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years.
Every major studio, every major network, not asked, told, to stay away from a film about saving children. Think about what that coordination requires. Think about how many people at how many levels of the industry had to receive that instruction and comply with it completely for it to work as effectively as it did. That is not one bad executive with a personal agenda. That is a coordinated industry-wide response to a single film. And the people capable of coordinating that kind of response are not mid-level producers. They are the people who sit at the top of the cultural infrastructure. The gatekeepers. When Feldman tried to premiere his own documentary in March 2020, the streaming platform hosting it crashed 15 minutes into the event. Whether that was a coordinated attack or overload, no satisfying explanation has ever been produced. What everyone agrees on is that the timing was remarkable.
Bad guy, I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
This is a man who has spent 30 years, millions of dollars of his own money, and an enormous amount of personal safety trying to make the world hear something it was not ready to hear, and every time he spoke, the machine responded. Now here's a question that the people trying to dismiss all of this have never produced a clean answer to. If these allegations are false, if the names being connected to this network are being connected unfairly, why the silence? Feldman has been making accusations for over a decade. Caviezel has been naming patterns and describing what he witnessed in interviews that receive millions of views. Witnesses are coming forward, documentaries are being produced, and the response from the people at the center of these allegations? No defamation lawsuits, no public demands for accountability from the accusers, no legal action of any kind. When someone is falsely accused of something this serious, they fight back. They hire lawyers. They demand retractions. They pursue defamation claims aggressively and publicly. The silence from the figures at the center of these allegations is not nothing. In the context of everything else documented here, it is something that demands an explanation. Here is where everything converges. The names Feldman exposed in his 2020 documentary did not stay in his story. They started appearing in completely separate, independently conducted investigations. Marty Weiss, named by Feldman in the context of his own abuse, appeared again in Quiet on Set, the documentary about what was happening to children at Nickelodeon. Same man, different decade, different victims, same network.
I believe it's going to move a lot of whistleblowers to come forward, but not one. And the hundreds, maybe thousands of them worldwide start coming forward and telling the truth of what's real.
The Hollywood arm is exposed. The financial arm is under investigation. The island operation is in federal records. The media arm, the gatekeepers, the validators, the people who decided for decades what you were allowed to know and who you were allowed to question, that arm is next. Stay locked in, because this story is nowhere near over.